Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's episode is Holly McNeill. She is a creator of the P.E.R.L.O.V.E formula, a set of mindfulness and meditation practices based on the teachings she encountered on her spiritual journey. During our conversation, Holly shares the lessons she learned, the overlaps and the similarities she's found in the varying spiritual practices and teachings, and how her life experiences have inspired her to create art. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
Well, Carol, it took me actually a long time to even get to where I could even find it at all. But I feel it most when my heart is open, when I'm flowing and letting life flow, and I'm not resisting, complete and utter non-resistance. And it's just amazing, the calm, the peace, the wisdom that all comes through. But it took me a long time to get there, to kind of get to that point.
Perfect. Thank you, Holly. And before we go further into our conversation, just share a little bit about your story and what got you to this place of peace, what got you to the place of doing the work that you're doing and to your present higher energetic resonance.
Right. Well, thank you. And I have a class I give online, and I tell people I'm not a monk. I'm our nun. Obviously, I haven't sat in silent meditation for years or lived in a cave. Right. I'm just a person like you and everyone else who has struggles in their lives. Right. And at age 34, I hit it's the very lowest point of my unhappy, self-absorbed, anxiety-filled life. I found myself crying on the toilet in the middle of the night. I had made some poor choices and I was scared. I was scared shitless, actually. And I made a vow in that moment to life, God, Buddha, the universe, anyone out there listening, help me and I'll do better. Give me another chance and I'll change. So I was given that second chance. And with my karmic debt in tow, I went out to make good on that vow. And it wouldn't be easy. The first thing it did was to catapult me out of a mutually manipulative and controlling marriage into an 8-year battle for my children. It took everything I had to prevent my alienation from them. My journey would take me from my hometown in the Black Hills of South Dakota to Minneapolis and beyond. Across the country and from coast to coast, I read books, attended retreats, any spiritual thing that came, anything that came along, I was into it. In the greater New York City area, I studied Buddhism for 5 years before at age 49, I packed up everything I had, left everyone I knew to move across the United States to live in San Francisco in a Dharma house for a year. Mm. In my early 40s, I put 2 intentions out to the world then. As I got further along in my journey, I started seeing some pieces to come together. So those 2 intentions, the first was to retire from my chosen profession as an architect before I turned 50. And the second was to have the time and space to write about what I knew. So as intentions work, I retired 2 days before I turned 50. And in 2017, I sat down to write. But it wouldn't be until the COVID pandemic when I printed out a book proposal for a book I was trying to get an agent for. And looking at those pages, I could see it. It was like a light came on. It was like, the final piece of a puzzle, this set of mindfulness and meditation practices that I'm now here to share with the world, and I'm grateful to be here. So that's me.
Yeah. And it's great that, well, it's not great that we go through it, but that you to make something of it, because I believe that there are so many people that experience, we all experience something, And yet
Right.
there are some people who get weighed down and caught in what life is giving them. And then others who manage to turn it into something and create it into something for their own redemption, but then also for the redemption and the guidance of others as well. What do you think was it about the way that you approached what you were going through, all of that pain, all of that loss, all of that reinvention and learning, that made you want to kind of turn it into something, whether you thought whether it was going to fly or not, but you just felt compelled to kind of move it into something else?
Well, at the beginning, like I said, I was so stuck and I was so lost. I had no idea. I just knew how horribly painful it was. And so I didn't even know what I was looking for, just something better. But in time, by keeping this intention, like the power of intention is so huge. By keeping this intention, every time I had a question, the next thing I read or saw or heard on a conversation as people walk by was the answer, right? And so it wasn't as if I read something and had a question. It was like I had a question and the answer would show up. And so I did this for 10 years, right? And in 2009, well, maybe 8 years, because my journey started right around the time of 9/11, when we're all at a really low point here in America and in the world, of course. But in 2009, I started writing these things down. I'm an architect, and my job is to put big puzzles together. I used to do hospital work. So I'm really good at kind of piecing things together that I hear. So in 2009, I started writing these things down, and something told me, and I don't think it's just something, I think it's my higher self, right? That I had done this once before, maybe in a previous life or previous incarnation, and I had gotten really far with it. And I decided at the end, nah, I don't want to do this. It's too hard. And life went, okay, you're going to go back and do this again, and it's going to be super hard this time, which it was. And then you're going to want to do something about it. And that's where I'm at. There's nothing that will stop me from trying to help people who are as stuck as I was, not have to take 20 years to get to this. Because in actuality, what I found was a few simple truths that I know a lot of these teachers and gurus over the years, sometimes you read something once, you read it again 10 years later, it tells you something completely different. They all pointed back to a few simple truths about who we are, how our conditioning, our mind works, and how powerful we are, the power we have to create whatever we want to do, actually. So.
And can you tell me, because I'm a lover of an acronym, as you can tell.
Yes.
And you've got so many in your work as well. Like you've got P.E.R.L.O.V.E and you've got TEF, the thoughts, emotions, and feelings. How did you create those? How did they come to you? And then you decide to kind of create around that?
Yeah, it's an amazing story. Like I said, at first I called them waking monologues, all these different things that I learned. And then, like I said, one day I was looking at this stack of papers and I could see these practices. So my husband, who's supportive enough, but he's not like into this, he and I sat down, he's good and one afternoon, and I was explaining each practice, and he said, okay, P.E.R.L.O.V.E, right? So we came up with this acronym, and it's beautiful, right? So PER, pledge, evaluate, recognize, is where we first train the mind. And then love, locate, open, vest, and expand, is when we then train the heart, or open the heart. And so TEF, interestingly enough, TEF, thoughts, emotions, and feelings. I had read a book by Dr. Richard Carlson called You Can Be Happy No Matter What. And I read it about 10 years into my journey. And this guy's famous for a little book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, right? Everyone knew that book. It was a phenomenon. And then I went back and I read that book again, You Can Be Happy No Matter What. And in the book, there's this teeny little reference to a book from the 80s with a very unfortunate title, Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, right? And where a Dr. Enrique Suarez looked at mental health and all the ways that we're trying to help people. And he was talking about how our thoughts, these principles of thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and it all clicked to me. right? Over my journey, there's been secular teachings, there's been neuroscience, psychological understandings, spiritual teachings, and it all clicked. I'm sitting over there in my chair. It's all clicked in that moment. These thoughts, emotions, and feelings, TEF, which we can get stuck in. Think of it like taffy, sticky and sweet. Only this is taffy, sticky and deceiving, because most of our thoughts are actually negative if we're not paying attention. So it was amazing how it all came together. But I guess I shouldn't be amazed, because everything has continued to show up, right? Like this today with you, Carol, this showing up and being able to talk about this. It's really, when we put an intention out there for change, we need to be aware of what shows up, because it does. Absolutely does.
Oh, I'm 100% with that as well. Just especially this year, I don't know what's happened in my life, where what's moving in my chart or whatever has happened, but there's just been like more of the more streamlined I've got. But what I've realized as well, and something that's really kind of like given me confirmation, is the moment that I feel that something is completely off, I need to just drop it. And the way that has really shown itself up for me, especially in the past 2 or 3 months, is people that I've had maybe close collaborative relationships with, but then there's always been this kind of like area where I'm like, I don't know, there's something that's not completely working here. And even though then I want to be really honorable and kind of step away nicely and leave everything, and in the time where I've just gone, no, I'm not going to do this, to the point where I'm actually surprising myself.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, did I just do that? Is that the right thing? You know, you kind of say that you send the email, you make the phone call, and then you're like, oh, okay, you know, because even when you're making a separation and you know it's for your own good, doesn't mean that you still don't have to sit and grieve it and kind of question whether you've done the right thing. There's still that area of doubt, but at that point you've burnt the bridge anyway, so you have to deal with it, you know. So you can't like kind of like call them back or like unsend the email and go, no, I didn't mean that. It's like, it's done. But what has really shown up for me in like a matter of days has been the minute that I have separated myself from that and then been like, okay, did I do the right thing? You know, something has plopped in that is bigger.
That's right.
And I've just been like, okay, wow, you know, because even the day before, I'd still be like, did I do the right thing? Have I made that, you know, we worked for so long and we were working towards this end, and I've said no, and then I've put a line under it. And then that space where I've just been going, okay, well, the energy that I was giving them, let me dig into mine a little bit more. And then literally a boatload of opportunities have just like dropped in, where you're just like, okay, then, all right, I'll keep doing this, you know, just it's turned around in quick succession, and in the intention of me going, I really feel that this isn't right for me anymore, and I'm going to honor what I'm being told instead of trying to like spanning out much longer, which I normally would have done, you know, especially when it came to like holding on to kind of long-term friendships or family relationships, where you're just like, yeah, but you know, it's meant to be the thing and we can work through. It's like, sometimes it's not like that. Whereas now I'm moving quicker and seeing how things are coming in quicker, and then I'm like, okay, so what now? Is really indicative of trusting that gap.
Yeah, so we tap it with this flow with an open heart, right? And love is the favorite part of the formula for me. But this flow with the open heart, we're tapping into that energy with our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, with our TEF, whether we know it or not. And when it's not working, right, we're using that flow kind of against us, right, to try to make something work, to try it with our own expectations of how to reach a goal, trying to make that work, and it doesn't work, right? So as soon as you let that go, it opens up this amazing energy for things to show up in your life, right?
One thing I did want to ask you as well, that you'd mentioned or touched on a little bit, is having moved through lots of modalities and different practices, that you see that there's overlap.
Yeah.
And I recognize that as well from things that I've been through all over the years, different things. What kind of overlaps did you notice, and what areas were there overlaps that you thought were maybe they were like completely disparate things, and yet there was something that, you know, overlapped in the center, on the edge, or whatever? What surprised you in that way?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because one of the things I talk about is that when you want to learn something or understand something, you have to listen to it several times, over and over and over, because we've had these negative thoughts over and over. So we have to kind of rewire our brain that way. And so sometimes you have to hear things in a little different package before it really clicks, right? Before you can really click. And so these few simple truths I talked about, the biggest one, of course, is that we are not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, right? That we are not our TEF. We're so much more than that. That thoughts alone are powerless. And if we don't engage in them, if we don't attach to them, I mean, we only suffer because we attach to these negative thoughts, emotions, and feelings that we may have unconsciously or without awareness reinforced over the years, right? And if we don't attach to them, the happiness thief, this TEF, has no choice but to fall apart if you're not engaging in it, right? And so I've heard this in different stories and for different ways. And the biggest thing, of course, is that, and well, it is the same that I hear that you hear that from the neuroscience point of view about Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about when nerve cells that fire together wire together. So when you think negative thoughts, you live those, they become real. And then if you don't think them, if you start putting in compassion or happiness, it starts to break those up. So you hear it from a neuroscience point of view. Of course, you hear it from, you know, like psychologically, if you're more upbeat. But then you also hear it from the gurus. Eckhart Tolle says, at the moment we realize that we are not the voice in our head, that we're the one that hears it, a whole realm of intelligence opens up. Ajahn Shanti is an American-born spiritual teacher, and he says the same thing. There's this vast realm of intelligence beyond thoughts. Right? Buddhism says that the root mind is not in the head, it's in the heart. Right? So this teaching that first of all, that we're not our TEF, we're not our thoughts, emotions, and feelings, that there's this vast realm of intelligence that when we can let go of that, I've heard, can all these gurus be wrong, right? It just keeps coming back to me over and over in different modalities. Mm-hmm. And it is actually that simple. There's a wonderful teacher, Tim Olmsted. He's the president of the Pema Chodron Foundation. Wow. And he says that the entire journey, our entire path, is not about perfecting ourselves, right? It's not about fixing whatever it is we think what's wrong in our TEF, in our happiness thief, in our whole black bag full of stuff we stuffed away and don't want to look at. It's not about that. It's simply about becoming familiar with what is already there, right? Underneath all of that TEF, when you start to disengage with the happiness thief, and the neural net starts to loosen up, these moments of clarity come through, these moments of peace and understanding. And the more you can locate them, locate, and open your heart, invest in those, the more understanding that you have about that you are actually this much more than our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And that's been the biggest ticket for me. It's very freeing, it's very powerful. And additionally, then, though, once we're aware of that, we can use our own thoughts, emotions, and feelings to create our world, right? We understand that our role in creating happiness for ourselves first, and then for others. We're so conditioned in our negativity. We each have between 6,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day, right? 80%, like I said, are negative, 95% repeat. And if we're not paying attention, we're so conditioned in that a lot of time we can't see our way out, right? If you're unfamiliar with what's going on, you're just blind to it. Mm-hmm. So these practices are all about becoming familiar, first of all, with your TEF, your happiness thief, what you've stuffed away in your black bag. And secondly, then recognizing those as that comes up so that you can then, realize that they're powerless. Thoughts are powerless. Find this amazing space of who you are. And the whole journey goes on from there. It's really quite beautiful. And heaven or hell is here, right? Depending on how you train your mind.
That's a big conversation as well to have, and to explain to people that it's all here and it's all of your doing, because then the immediate response to that will be like, well, why is why would I create such a bag of mess and bag of pain for myself? It's trying to get them to understand it's an experience in itself, and it can be as painful or non-painful. I've found that when I've gone through painful situations in the past, it was like, woe is me, and why am I suffering, and I'm a good person and I don't deserve this, and but then as time goes on and like another challenge will come up, there's a space to go to that you're still going through it. It's still uncomfortable. You want it to be over. But then there's like, well, maybe there's a lesson in this. Maybe I'm being pushed into a corner and being shown something, or being kept away from something, or noticing this repeated pattern for like the final time, where I'm just so over it and I'm so sick of it that this is the time that I get to the root of it and pull it out and make sure we're not going to do this again, because I'm boring myself now. When they say you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you actually take that action to actually make that shift.
Yeah, well, Adyashanti, this American-born spiritual teacher, he says that every being, whether we know or aware of it or not, we're on a trajectory back to our unity, back to our wholeness. So what I try to tell people, and when I try to realize in my own life, that every person, your small isolated self, your TEF, right, maybe trying to keep you fearful and scared and attached. But your universal, your omnipresent, all-pervasive mind is showing you in every person, place, or thing, every event in your life, no matter how tragic or how repetitious it is, what you need to set yourself free. And my mother was very narcissistic. We're doing a show in Hollywood, in the Hollywood Fringe Festival in June with my niece, and we're talking and I talk about my mother, right? She was very self-absorbed, narcissistic, and so I tried to run away from that, right? But then I married my mother, right? I found that again a narcissistic, kind of controlling, manipulative person. So I moved from Rapid City, from the Black Hills, to Minneapolis, and then it became my boss was like that, and I even moved to the greater New York City area, and soon enough, I could place them around a table. Every one of these people that were reflecting back to me this kind of self-absorbed, narcissistic, my big patterns are from childhood is unworthiness and unlovability. So I'm seeing them attacking me. But you're absolutely right. Until I finally kind of sat them all down at the table and said enough, right? I'm done with this. You're showing me what I need to look at. And once I did that, I mean, even working in the greater New York City area, there's a lot of people that, architects can be, pretty hot-headed, right? But it didn't bother me anymore because I wasn't attached to those thoughts, emotions, or feelings anymore. But it took all of those people for me to finally look at it, right? But definitely, exactly. Things and events keep showing up in your life until you look at what it's trying to show you.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, and I can agree with that. It's interesting as well when you are, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, when you would consider yourself to be very open-hearted and very empathetic, that the balance of the person that you get taught the lessons by are these extremely narcissistic personalities that will keep showing up in different guises within your life until you actually take stock of that as well, because I recognize a similar pattern. Just coming dressed in different people. Some were men, some were women, some were people that I work with, some were family, some were partners. It's just like, why am I meeting you all and you all look so different? And also they all meander into your life and kind of attach themselves to a different part of you. So sometimes you don't even necessarily see it happening. They could be there for a good year or so before, depending on how skillful they are or how blind you are, depending on which way you're looking at it, is before you start to hang on a minute, notice the thing that's coming up and how then you start to extract yourself from that. And what I've noticed is the minute that you kind of strengthen your resolve and go, okay, we're not doing that anymore, and they realize that you're not going to be there, is it rears its ugly head for the very last time to just try and, and comes at you with everything and everyone as well, if they're skillful enough to try and really come and like create the full destruction of you. But if you can make it through that, I'm sure you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about how things can get worse before they get better. And the first part of the formula, pledge. So first we're pledging to pay attention to what's going on in our mind, right? And then we're evaluating what these patterns are. So Dr. Joe Dispenza, and back to the neuroscience, right? So whenever we have a negative thought or pattern, we send those chemicals down to our bodies and into our body instantly. And each one of our cells has thousands of receptors, okay? So if it's anxiety or worthlessness, right, we're sending that message down to our body. And as the cells divide, it has more receptors that are expecting this. And so then your programming will actually want to be reinforced. So your body actually sends images back to your mind, and we recreate these people in our lives because that's what our program is. That's what we're stuck in, right? So as you said, when you have that resolve, when you can see it, I tell people, take the leap of faith that you are separate from all of this. You're separate from your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And when you can create that space between you and those thoughts, right? And you can look at them from a different place, from a place of wisdom, you recognize that it's been you all this time reinforcing these patterns and noticing these people because they're going to be around anyway. Mm-hmm. And so once you find that resolve and that space and you let that stuff go, they might still be there, but it's not in your program anymore, right? It's not as prevalent and it's not as destructive in your life. And it's really freeing because you can still be around those people at work or whatever, but you're not as attached to them anymore. It's very powerful.
Yeah, it's amazing how that shift can happen, and then you can be around them, and suddenly that angst or everything that you felt that was making you uncomfortable kind of turns into like compassion, maybe even pity, right, to a point, because then you recognize the pain that they must be existing in order to get power or influence or whatever it is by going around and inflicting so much pain and kind of stirring the pot. It takes a lot of energy, and I'm a relatively lazy person. I don't want to go around having to kind of stir the pot and spin the plates and create all of this drama in order to feel alive or to make someone feel worse than me in order to make myself feel better, so it's seeing that and having a heart for them.
Yeah, but that is exactly what we do. Our brains, right? We've programmed them to do that. So that's why things do get worse before they get better, because when we start to challenge these programs, the mind is like, wait a minute, malfunction. It will throw up roadblocks to you. And so you have to recognize that when you try to start to make this change, things are gonna get worse before they get better. But then absolutely, you kind of get over this hump and you can look back and understand that this person, their pain and why their brain is doing the same thing to them, right? Trying to reinforce these patterns. And so you can start to have compassion. That's actually how we start to have compassion for other people, instead of, mostly thinking about ourselves and how this person's affecting us and how that affects me, and how, you can start to understand that each person is living their own reality, right? Based on their own thoughts, emotions, and feelings. A lot of times it's negative, right? And so you start to have compassion for them and understanding, which then again makes it easier for you not to get so bogged down with their stuff, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to talk about your performance, or the upcoming performance that you've got at the Hollywood Fringe, and stepping into that role. And tell me all about that. As a performer myself, like, I'm always fascinated in people's expression.
Yes, well, as I said, things have shown up for me, and my niece Jocelyn. She called me up one day in 2018 and said, "Hey, I just broke up with my boyfriend. Can I move in for a while?" And I'm like, "Sure," right? For 2 weeks, she said, and 4 months later, she moved out. But we created a real bond then. And she really opened up to me about her life and her own struggling from, her mother, which is my sister. And it really broke my heart to see that that was happening, even though I should have been aware of it. So we started she's a singer songwriter. I was working on my practices. We started creating just a little event down here in Orange County, California. And one of the producers from LA just came down to see our show. So he suggested we come up to Hollywood, which we did. And the Hollywood Fringe Festival, I don't know if people are aware of what that, it's kind of like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It's not kind of like it. It's like it's open to anyone. So in 2020, we created a show called The Mother Wound. And we were getting ready to do this show. And then, of course, COVID hit. So we didn't. And then during, of course, the pandemic, I came up with P.E.R.L.O.V.E. And so, the show wasn't ready to do back in 2020, right? I had this expectation of what it should be. And so I had put down a deposit, and they said, well, if you don't do the show, you lose your deposit. I said, okay, if I don't do it in 2023, let's, fine. So my niece and I are doing this show. It's called The Lost Formula to Happiness, 2 generations of women, aunt and niece, that unravel the happiness thief using these P.E.R.L.O.V.E. practices. And I talk about, like I said, what's deep down in my bag is unworthiness and unlovability. So sometimes, and they say at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, the hardest thing to do is to get butts in seats, right? So that's brushing up against my stuff, right? And going up to Hollywood where I'm not an actor and whatever. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? But it's that trust. It's that when I was driving up there yesterday, I felt my flow and this energy is like, this is right. This is what you should be doing. And I realized just this morning, actually, that a lot of people doing these shows, it's 3 weeks long. It's actually 4 weeks long with the preview. And there's like 500 shows. And a lot of people I'm meeting already are doing mental health awareness kind of type shows, right? It's that time. So I just thought to myself, you know what? Mental health fringers unite, right? I'm going to try to get us all together and to get people to come to this. But in letting it go, everything that showed, P.E.R.L.O.V.E. has been wonderful for me to help let it go as far as my TEF is concerned about, as my attachment to my old patterns, because the more if I don't let it go, I'm going to turn on into an anxiety-filled nervous wreck, right? And so I must let it go for these practices to flourish. Mm-hmm. And so like I said, I can either be like freaked out about it and like, what the hell am I doing? Or I can use this as an opportunity to just let go even more. And so, yeah, I'm going for it. And it should be fun. So if anyone, I don't know, I know you're in the UK, but if anyone's in LA in June, look us up.
Good for you. Good for you. I mean, there's something to be said about expression of any sort, especially expression that comes from like a real lived experience. And you've kind of created that whole thing. And then also the fact that you created it together with your niece when you were both really digging deep, and it's got that authenticity about it. And you mentioned there's a lot of people talking about mental health. It's great that there are more people actually kind of just vocalizing this as well, because my background is that there was mental illness in the family. And at that time, it was like you didn't speak about it. You just didn't. I mean, like over the past 5 years or so, maybe it's become more possible or more acceptable to speak about these things. But for a long period of my life, it was something that happened behind closed doors, and you just didn't tell anyone about this. Like no one should know, because we don't want anyone to know that there's this mental illness, there's this madness, this crazy going on, because I think that's one of people's biggest fears, is losing their minds. And yeah, in some respects, we've all lost our minds,
Absolutely.
But we don't even know where our minds are. So how are other people approaching it, and what's the conversation that you're finding around mental health?
Well, it's interesting because it just, like I said, my own patterns, my own habit, my own TEF is about, nobody likes me and whatever. But I just started talking to people, and, women and men. And one guy's doing a comedy show about mental health in some ways, about anxiety and how you think about it when you're really saying something, but then your mind, you're going, what the hell did I leave the stove on, and blah, blah, blah. And another woman that I spoke to, she just got divorced. She's recreating her life. And she was in theater 17 years ago, right? So she's going out doing this one woman show, telling her story. And quite honestly, I'm just starting to hear that. And at first I thought mine is what they call a performance lecture, because I go through and I talk about the practices, and then Jocelyn and I, my niece, go through our stories. And so I thought I was going to be like this kind of lone wolf out here, but I'm just starting to hear that how wonderful that there's all the, and who knows how many more there are. So I just have this idea, and I think you're right, especially with COVID. Now I think it's okay to talk about healing and growing. And I'm excited actually to see if I can get a bunch of people together and just make this fringe kind of, a big part of it about mental health. And because we put these intentions out to the world about my biggest intention is that the P.E.R.L.O.V.E practices last beyond this life, beyond me, right? So that when I'm gone, people can still benefit from them. I mean, that's really my biggest goal. But you can't control, right, how that shows up, right? So when this showed up, like, first my fear is nobody's going to want to come to my show. It's about mindfulness and meditation. And then I hear all these other people talking about it. And so it's showing up that this is a huge opportunity to create awareness, not just for my show, for everyone who's doing it. So who knows, right? We have to let go of things for other things to show up. And that's what's showing up at the moment for me. It's exciting.
So good. And it's so, for me, who's come from a background of having experienced it and experiencing what's happening behind closed doors, and then having to go out in the world and not speak about the most influential thing in my life and pretend it's not happening, which in itself is a mind game,
Yeah.
and just because if I think about it, unless people that I know from school listen to my podcast or really know me, most of them would not know my background at all, because I closed the door and went to school and presented really well, but like that wasn't the situation behind closed doors, because you just didn't speak about it. And yet now that more people are talking about their challenges or how they're feeling about things mentally, or then also opening up to mindfulness or spirituality, or really exploring their repeated patterns and really wanting to get better, I think it's really showing that everyone's feeling this. Some people have got the language for it. Some people have kind of created something. Others are feeling some discomfort and anxiety and not really knowing where to go with it, and might still be kind of looking for the kind of the drugs and the pills and the potions to kind of deal with it until that they see that will not work for them. But for some, they have to really kind of try that for a long period of time until they get out of it. But I think for me to see the shift that's happened in society at large about that is great, because having to keep such big, heavy secrets on behalf of yourself and other people is a weight in itself. And then realizing that behind probably every door on your street, everyone was going through the same thing, and like you said, with COVID, and we just come out of that, it seems. And with so many people being forced to stay in their homes and not communicate and deal with what their household was, even there was all this going out in the world, but you were then requested that you stay at home and have to deal with what was going on in your house and what was going on in your life if you didn't play. It really brought the reality of the life that you were living right in. So many people quit their jobs, so many people split up from their marriages, so many people reconnected, and there's all these children that were born 9 months later. It was interesting, the shift and the impact that had outside of the pandemic, what that actually meant to people on an individual basis, because they were in their own space and they were having to face the reality of what they'd created for their lives up until that point. And now we're seeing kind of how people are coming out the other side and what they're doing with that.
Yeah, it is quite fantastic, actually. And you're absolutely right, Carol. There's people like, and I don't know your entire story, but there's people that know there's something wrong, right? And they're knowing they're hiding these secrets, and like you said, trying to act kind of like everything's okay. Most people, right, want to show that everything, I mean, that's what all Facebook and Instagram is. Look at me, I'm okay. And then there's some people like myself. I mean, I didn't even know what was wrong. My family it was all kind of manipulative and kind of undermining. And so when you grow up that way, all you know is that this is wrong. It's something is not right here. Right. And so being willing to talk about it and being able to talk about it now is huge. And so like you and I'm doing this thing at the Fringe Festival and I'm wanting to get these practices out. But at the same time, it's really, it's butting up against my stuff, the stuff in my bag. But when you use that as an opportunity, when people use these things that come up as an opportunity and look at it like, here's an opportunity to see what my stuff is, right? Then, yeah. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all do that more?
But I think it takes a level of trust or a level of believing that in looking at it and kind of really examining it, that you're actually going to get to some sort of understanding and then maybe some sort of solution. Because where I feel people really get stuck is just there's like, what is there that I can do? Like, this is the way it is. And, these are the cards that I've been handed. So let me just kind of like play and trudge along through life, dealing with the hand that I've been given and not seeing the opportunity that is presenting to you for you to look at something. And maybe it hits you the hardest because you're the lineage breaker. This is something that's run in the family time and time and time again, and you're the one that just goes, okay, no. And even then when you're doing it, you don't even think that you're doing it for generations to come and generations behind you. You're just over it at that point in time. But it really does create a ripple effect of healing when you deal with what you're dealing with and dealing with what you're no longer tolerating, because you start to see some level of self-worth, even though you've been told all your life that you don't have any worth or you don't have any value. There's the fact that we actually take this journey and take this opportunity shows that there's a little inkling of something that's kind of getting through, even though the louder voice might be all the stuff. Like there's a little bit that's going, no, we don't 100% believe this. We're going to try for something more.
That's that trajectory that Adyashanti talks about, that everyone's on. I do a deeper dive class, a monthly forum, and this month we go through Pledge, Evaluate, Recognize, and this 3 months the theme is called Simple and Obvious. But it's simple and obvious, like really, it's the simple and obvious. And you're right, and people get stuck because anything that we think about consistently, consciously or unconsciously, but consistently, becomes so solid and so real that we can't believe that this isn't exactly how it is. Right? We get so stuck in believing that this is exactly how it is, which is why I ask people at the beginning of the practices, just please take a leap of faith, right? That you are separate from all of this, that there is something separate from all of this. And when you find something that helps you to see that, right, you have to listen to it over and over and over and over. There was a CD by John Kabat-Zinn that a wonderful therapist gave to me 10 years into my journey. And as I drove from Rapid City to Minneapolis, 600 miles, I know in England, you don't ever can go 400 miles without turning, but there's 2 turns to get to my college. And when I went to visit my family at home, and I listened to that CD over and over and over and over and over again. So if you can find something that helped, like this class that I give, I tell people it's free, it's online. You should listen to it over and over and over, because when you think you are so stuck, it's because you can't see beyond your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And so when I did listen to the CD, I memorized it, I even transcribed it, and then of course I lost it, which sucks. But we're actually using a part of that CD, a little bit of that transcription in our play in Hollywood, because it was so meaningful. right there. But if I hadn't listened to it over and over and over again, it would be gone.
Right.
I would not remember it because my brain wasn't wired that way. It takes 3 times to even remember something, 8 times to get it to sink in, and 21 days to make something a habit. So I tell people, if you feel completely stuck, right? If you feel that there's no way than this, that's fine, right? But just for 21 days, try an affirmation, listen to something over and over and over and over. And then you will start, like you said, to create space between all of that crap and painful stories that we've created, and to start to see it from a place of wisdom. And from there, then you can start to make changes, understand changes, become familiar with changes, and then live those changes. But it's up to you, right? And if you think you're stuck, then you are, right? If you think you're stuck and there's no way out and this is who you are, then that's the truth for you, because that's your reality. But if you can take the leap of faith that there's something more, that you are separate from this, you're actually a very powerful creator. And when you understand what this is, you can respond to that with wisdom, because those thoughts are always going to be there. Especially if you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, they've been coming up for a long time. But then you can recognize them. That's the R in P.E.R.L.O.V.E. Recognize, I recognize you, stinky little piece of teff, right? And you can set it down, the thoughts, emotions, and feelings highway, creating space to create other things in your life. So that being stuck is why things aren't so simple and obvious, because we just believe it. So my big push for anyone, and in the show I'm doing in Hollywood, is there, you don't even have to believe that you can change. Just listen to something that speaks to you over 20 times, 40 times. I don't care how many times it takes, because we've been reinforcing negative stuff for a long time, right? So just do it, just try it, just take a leap of faith, just try it for 21 days. And you'll see a difference. I guarantee it. That's how the mind works. It's not, as Tim Olmsted says, it's not spirituality, it's not religion, it's not anything. It's just how the mind works. Yeah. If you have an angry mind, you see an angry world. If you have a happy mind, you see a happy world. So up to you, really.
Yeah, and it really is your own choice, isn't it? And I think that's more people are getting the picture that you are creating. Like you said, if you think you're stuck, then you're stuck. Yes. And that's the kind of like the circle where people go, but I'm stuck. I'm like, yeah, because you say you're stuck. Can you see how you're in that? Like, maybe you could try a different story. Maybe you're only 80%, whatever it takes to kind of like start to loosen the chink on that belief, so that you can maybe like try something different, just for giggles, and just see where you go with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if it doesn't work, then at least you're still here. There's the worst that can happen. Like, no one, it's not going to take you out to that extent. There's so much possibility on the other side, and what you said about, and what you say about repetition. If I think in my life, everything that I know how to do now with ease is because I've spent so long just trudging the grooves. Like, that's how I learned to play the piano. That's how we learned to drive. That's how I learned to sing. Everything is just repetition, and you keep at it, and you refine and you refine and you refine until it becomes such second nature that you don't even realize that you're doing it. So if we've got into this groove of like kind of like darkness and negativity, maybe it's possible.
Yes, absolutely. You don't even have to really believe it. You can just try it, right? Try to think that there's something else there. And really it is about what we repeat over and over and over again. So yeah, if you're stuck, and if you feel that your life is terrible and there's no way out, just give something a try. Like you said, you have nothing to lose, right? It will not put you in a worse place. Right? It will not. Right?
Yeah. You might even surprise yourself.
Yeah, it's called hope, right? There's hope for everyone. I think there's hope for everyone.
Before we go, Holly, do you have any last words? And then just tell us about anything that you've got coming up as well. You've got your performance, and how people can connect with you.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Well, like I said, thank you so much, Carol, for having me on your podcast. And last words, like I said, it's really about repeating things, but also being kind to yourself and understanding. One of the things I talk about is at first, when you try to change things, it's going to be difficult, right? Because your patterns and behaviors are often much stronger than your will. This is true. So I have this secret weapon, okay? It's called the indirect way of recognizing your TEF. And it goes like this. Acting in ways contrary to your patterns aids in bringing the happiness safe out of hiding, right? Acting in ways contrary to your patterns. This is great news because there's many tools to do this, right? Give yourself some compassion, right? Give yourself some compassion, sympathetic joy for somebody else, kindness, forgiveness. I mean, this sounds kind of like, yeah, fluffy, whatever, right? But this works because what happens is that your happiness thief, your robo brain is going along, doing its thing with spewing all this stuff out at you. All of a sudden you throw in some kindness or some compassion or affirmations. Come on, affirmations, do them more than once. And your brain's like, does not compute. And it starts to break that down, right? So this is a secret weapon. Just go out in nature, and that's why when we meditation, by the way, is just a tool. It's nothing to get hung up about, but it's why we feel good when we meditate, but then we go out in our day and it all gets plugged up, right? So go out in your day and just try to, look at beautiful things and give yourself compassion for your situation. And then you'll find that starts to create the space and do it every day, right? So my website is the P.E.R.L.O.V.E.formula.com. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I have a free 1 hour and 6-minute class that goes through each one of these practices. And so if there's something that you're looking to listen to over and over and over and over again, I invite you to listen to this class because I bring up all the teachers and gurus that I talked about today. And it's really a straightforward kind of it's the formula is contiguous: pledge, evaluate, recognize, locate, open, vest, and expand. You might be clear down at vesting in your open heart with all this amazing energy come through. And then you do something at the Fringe Festival and all this anxiety comes up. So you go back to E, right? So the formula is contiguous, but the more you work with it, the more you realize, the more you loosen your grip on the fruition of this world, the more power you have to create. So please, if you're interested, sign up for that free class. I do have the show upcoming in Hollywood in June. And then if you want, I do have a deep dive forum. It's very low cost. It's all online. I know you're in the UK. It's $25 a month. We meet twice a month. And if I get people from overseas, the classes are recorded if you can't come to them. But each month we deep dive into pledge, evaluate, recognize, and then we go back to pledge, evaluate, recognize every month. And we deep dive into these things to kind of get it to repeat, right? And in time, I will create a clarity of love forum. That's more the spiritual part, the heart opening part. But if you're interested, it's low cost. Like I said, we meet twice a month. The classes, it's a small group right now, and you can listen to those classes over and over and over again. So just like I said, my biggest goal is I spent 20 years, not that I knew that I was spending 20 years trying to create these practices, but now that they have arrived, my goal is that they live beyond my life. So thank you so much, Carol, for letting me be here. I'm so amazed at your story and your journey and what you're doing. All I see on Facebook and Instagram, and just keep going.
Thank you, Holly, for joining me on this episode, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com, CarolMaywhittick.com. There is still the opportunity for you to join the Embody Her, the Embody Higher Energetic Resonance journey. The link is in the show notes before. This is a free journey, 3 steps to becoming the woman of your dreams. Feel it, embody it, and be it. Also on other social medias, you can find me on Facebook under Carol May Whittick and Casmic, Cazmick, on Instagram. Also look out for the sister episode to Her Conversations, Her Inspirations, Higher Energetic Resonance Inspirations. Until the next episode, have a great week. Thank you.